as I said yesterday, I live here in Aspen and I work for the city. And I have a story about something that happened to me last night. So we'll just put it in real time, small town politics. I guess I was hoping that since I've seen all of you yesterday that you've all maybe showered or at least like drank some water from the tap here. And in most towns you might, you get out of the shower and you go, the tap didn't run dry, or maybe you never have that thought, right? But here in Aspen, the fact that the tap didn't run dry when you showered was not because of good planning. It is because of sheer luck. So this is what we're struggling with here is climate change here in Aspen looks really different than it does for Kristen or in New York. We don't have flooding, we don't have sea level rise, we have drought, which means we have a lack of water, fires, and actually, surprisingly enough, mudslides on their mountain come springtime. So the biggest thing we're really struggling with right now is that we have no water storage. So the water that came to you to drink or to shower was in the river probably 24 hours ago. We pulled it out, we cleaned it, and we sent it directly to you. And that water is there because of last season's snowpack. So we had a good season last year. We still got some water. We always hope for a good season. So this is really, from a water manager perspective, it's really, really risky, and we're really vulnerable because our population is increasing quite a bit, not in new homes in Aspen, because as you can tell, there's no space for new homes, but in all those homes that are really big and really empty right now, they're becoming more and more populated more months out of the year. So we're seeing a huge demand, or a potential for a huge demand on our water supply. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is we try and enact really strict conservation measures to try and be less vulnerable. And then the only other thing we have right now in the toolbox is we own some rights to build 2 reservoirs, to dam 2 streams, one of them being up at the Maroon Bells, where you hopefully will go tomorrow, and the other at a neighboring valley. And that is a horrible choice to have. It is our only choice right now. So if Aspen gets to a place where we need to store water, which is very likely, the only option we have right now to store water would be to build 2 dams up these valleys, very picturesque valleys. So that's not great. We're trying to figure out other solutions, but that's our only solution right now. So what we have to do to keep those rights to store that water is every 6 years, we have to go to water court. And we have to say, hey, we're going to keep these rights. Will you let us keep these rights? And we've been doing that since 1969. We've been keeping these rights every 6 years. So we need to file again at the end of this month to keep these rights for another 6 years. So a few months ago, we went to City Council and we said, hey, just FYI, we're going to file for these rights like we have for 40 years. And our brilliant City Council said, you know what, don't file for the rights. How about you go ask the public what they think about filing for these rights? For those of you who live in Colorado and know Western water law, this is unheard of, to go and ask the public what they think about building dams up some of our 2 precious valleys. The answer is obviously not a good one. So normally, we're looking at this from a water manager perspective. We're not planning on building dams anytime soon, but it is our only thing in the toolbox, so we try and renew these rights as we can. So basically, 4 months ago, I was directed to go out and run a public process to engage this community and ask them what they think about our water storage rights and should we keep them. Of course, it became a conversation about dams. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 months. So before I go on, I want to kind of remind you of what I do here. So I'm the Climate Action Manager. That is my title, so I do all things climate. So in the nature of the way that rural Colorado towns work, I don't just work for the city of Aspen. I am the climate person for the county that we're in, pretty much all of our neighboring towns, a lot of our businesses, because there's nobody else funded to work on climate work in our immediate region. So what I've been doing for the 10 years that I've been in this position is really working with all these entities, city departments and the like, and trying to get them to consider how their work impacts climate. So I've been trying to get them to mitigate, essentially. We've had a fair amount of success with that. And then a few years ago, resiliency became a really big topic, right? It was more of a buzzword. And I worked with James and John from AGCI and the team, and I said, we need a resiliency plan here in the city of Aspen and for our community, and we recognize the need for this. And this is where we've had a huge success. So we got people to mitigate a little bit and think about, climate impacts, but now we're really thinking about I go door to door and I basically try and encourage people to think about how their work's going to be impacted in the future by a changing climate. And the way we did this is James and John and the great folks at AGCI created the most actionable report I've ever seen, and I'm very thankful for it. And that kind of makes me think I guess I'm supposed to answer what was I thinking about yesterday. I was thinking about Susie's question yesterday. You asked one of the panelists, what makes things actionable? Why is something actionable or not? And this report that we have is truly actionable because it's broad spectrum, it's third party, and it's not prescriptive. So it looks at all the things that we care about here in this community and how climate might impact all of them. It doesn't just look at water resources or human health. So it's been a really great tool. So we've been working for the past few years to create a City of Aspen resiliency plan, as well as create one for the community. So that's been going pretty well. So I've been kind of going on my merry way and doing that. What I didn't realize is, in the past, we really wanted to encourage people to think about how climate's going to impact their work. What I'm seeing now in Colorado is that people get it. They get that they need to think about resiliency planning. I do not need to convince them anymore. And so what I'm actually seeing is this flood of actually this whole world opening up that isn't that, that's really hard to navigate for folks. So the example would be our water utility commissioned a report a few years ago on a water availability. How much water do we have available? They do this every 10 years. They commission this report. And they have all these consultants they're going to choose from. And this year, they knew that they needed to include climate impacts. So they chose the consultant that said, hey, we have a climate guy on staff. And they go, oh, we're supposed to do that thing. Let's choose the consulting firm with the climate guy. And they literally came to me and they said, we're doing a report and they've got a climate guy, so we're good, right? And I was a little bit busy, so I didn't spend a ton of time thinking about what this meant. But so they commissioned this water availability study with the climate guy. And then the results came out internally and they looked at it and talking about this question we're struggling with, which is, do we overinflate or do we underinflate? What it showed was that we have a serious problem here in Aspen, that we're very vulnerable and we don't have storage and that demand is increasing and supply is going down and we should do something about that. But of course our water utility, given this frame, really didn't like that result. They said, this makes us look completely unprepared. We don't like what this says. And they went back to the climate guy and they said, can you use different models and redo this report so it tells a more moderate story? So back to current day, for the last 4 months, I've been going around and talking to the community about whether or not we should keep our water rights. And so I packed up my bag. I was like, okay, I'm ready to go, kind of get my butt kicked by the public, but I'm all right with it. And I took my report that we had created with AGCI, because that's the report I know and trust. And I kind of got the hook, as I was walking out the door, and they go, no, you're not using that science. You're using this science. And I was given this other study, the water availability study, that has now, I find out, been through a number of iterations and includes a number of different models, and one I'm not familiar with. So as you can imagine, we got fairly beat up by the public. And it has a good story, a good ending, which I'll tell you in a second. But what the theme I kind of have been thinking about and what I've been really struggling with is, if you maybe you're on a medication for a long time and then you go to the pharmacist and you're picking up a new medication, and I like to think that he enters it into the computer and does a scan for possible drug interactions, dangerous drug interactions. I want some way for, as we move into this flood where everyone knows they need climate models, and a lot of folks are just doing it to check a box, and then a whole other host of folks are doing it to actually implement and plan. There's this whole flood. I want this database that we have to enter into that gives me a warning, warning, dangerous climate modeling interaction ahead. And I think it's really pertinent here in this region where we have the resources in the city to work with James and John and AGCI and get the climate modeling that really works for us. But then I have a water utility in the same entity that's going with a totally different set of models to tell a completely different story that they want to tell. And then we have a neighboring town that's only 30 miles away going with a completely different story that they want to tell. And what I'm really worried about is that we're all able to pick and choose a very prescriptive model for the story we want to tell in this moment. And that's really hurtful to the bigger picture. Because right now I want to tell a story about how Aspen is vulnerable to drought and we should keep our water rights. But next year, I might want to tell a story about how more rain on snow in the spring can cause mudslides. And I should not be given the ability to pick and choose those models myself, nor should my water utility, nor should the neighboring town, because in the end, we're all hurting each other. And I feel like in a time when we need public trust more than ever, and we already have to caveat climate models with the future is uncertain and this is only a range of futures and la 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 la. It's really hard for people to then take action based on these models, especially when every 6 months we're trying to tell a different story and we're able to kind of pick and choose. So that's kind of my call, is I wish that I was forced, and I wish I could force others in this region to kind of help to work towards the bigger picture, which is let's all tell the same story, and it may not be convenient for this instance right now, but having that collective story is going to be better in the end. So luckily, I was able to stay as far away from this other report as possible in the public process, and I was able to convince our city council that keeping water rights is a good choice for right now. And last night they did vote 5-0 to refile for these water rights, which is really great news for us. We still have to win in water court, which is a big challenge, and the community still thinks we're building dams, but that's a whole nother thing. But so that was kind of my thought, is don't give me the city planner that does not have time to read all the reports. I do not know that much about climate models. I don't know that much about demand scenarios. Please don't give me that power to tell the story that's convenient for me right now, and don't give others that, because it's really, I think, just hurting us all in the end. So that's kind of my takeaway.